What's up, everybody, and welcome back. UFC 310 is this weekend, obviously. We got Alexandre Pantoja going up against Kai Asakura. And Asakura is the guy who's getting a title shot immediately upon his UFC debut. This has happened before in UFC history. I think there might be like 4 other guys that have done it. Gilbert Melendez was one of them, right, when he came over from Strikeforce. But pretty big deal. And in my mind, though, this is all good stuff. This is all positive because the flyweight division, even when Demetrius Johnson was the champion, has had so much trouble generating interest that I think any sort of this is as close as you're going to get to a cross promotion, really, right? The champion from Rising comes over, he fights the UFC, the current title holder in the UFC. And if Pantoja wins, it kind of solidifies that the UFC is the top dog, right? Everyone already kind of knows that, I think, as it is anyway, but it really kind of cements that, right? That the UFC really does have the best talent. And big fight. Anything that brings eyes to the flyweight division, where I think some of the most talented fighters in the world are competing at, right? I'm all for that. So I'm excited for this weekend. Also, this weekend's card is stacked fucking top to bottom. Chiesa and Weidman are both fighting on the early prelims, right? You got Weidman versus Anders and Chiesa versus Griffin. So those are on the early prelims. I mean, it's a stacked fucking card. So I'm pumped for this one. But before we get into breaking it down real quick, I just want to touch on some big fight announcements that Dana White put out. And that's Umar Nurmagomedov is going to be fighting Merab-Umar at UFC 311 for the bantamweight title. And Islam-Makhachev is going to be defending against Arman Tsarukyan at that same event. So 2 title shots and two title fights and 2 big title fights on the same card. And both of these fights, by the way, are fights that I feel like should be happening. Arman Tsarukyan, in my opinion, he's earned the title shot against Islam, and that rematch is super interesting because they're 2 guys who honestly are very well-rounded. If you look at Khabib, he wasn't much to there were things to be desired on the feet when it came to Khabib striking, right? But Islam seems to have a lot of those gaps filled up. Look at how he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski with the head kick, right? So he's very good on the feet, as is Arman. And I think that you're going to get a lot of really competitive wrestling and grappling exchanges in this fight. This is a very high-level fight between 2 guys in their prime, and they faced each other before, so it's going to be interesting to see who can make the adjustments and if Arman can get the job done. This is a huge fight. I'm super excited for this one. There's a very good argument that when those 2 step into the octagon together, it might be the highest expression of martial arts on the entire roster in terms of cumulatively, those 2 combined. And then you got Merab versus Umar Nurmagomedov booked. And I thought that Merab might get his way, but it looks like the UFC stepped in and made the fight happen and deserved it. I think Umar has earned the title shot, but Merab has been pretty adamant about the fact that he doesn't want to fight him. And when you get to that level of success, when you win the world championship, I don't necessarily think that you're afraid of anybody. I think that when you see fighters negotiating to fight different people, you're talking about sustaining your career, right? You're trying to make the best career choices so that you can move forward in the sport, have longevity, and find success. You hear Aljamain Sterling talk about this, Merab's teammate, about how he would take easier fights if he could and if they were presented to him. Why wouldn't you? You're the champion. You get to hold it the longer you hold it. All that stuff is good, right? So whenever you hear about John Jones ducking Aspinall or Merab ducking Umar, I don't really believe that they're ducking them. I guess you kind of are technically, right? But really, I don't think it's out of fear. I don't think it's anything like that. I think that you're just trying to take the smartest approach to your career in terms of risk management. That's my opinion. I think that everybody is just trying to do what's best for them. And Merab didn't get his way though, right? He's going to have to fight Umar. And it's a great matchup, 2 great title fights on the same card. I'm super excited for 311 now. That's a huge announcement. And the fights that I think, like I said, the fights that were supposed to happen are happening. So that's awesome as well. But let's get into breaking this UFC 310 card down. Now, as I mentioned, this card is fucking stacked from top to bottom. Let's run through. We're only going to break down the main card fights, but let's run through this card real quick. We got Lucas Brzezinski versus Kennedy Nzechukwu, Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper, Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin, Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. That's a great fight. And Eric Anders versus Chris Weidman, all on the early prelims. Then you get to the prelim card. Brian Battle versus Randy Brown. Great fucking fight. I love Brian Battle right now. Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. Themba Gorimbo versus Vicente Luque. And Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. Right? If you're a UFC fan, you probably know every single name on this card. Right? And if you're like, I hate the term casual. I think it's fucking stupid. But if you are just more of like a casual fan or like a fair weather fan, you probably know most of the people in the prelims, right? But we'll get into breaking this main card down. And the first fight is going to be Dooho Choi versus Nate Landwehr. And on paper, this is a fan favorite fight, man. This is a fan friendly fight, rather. Dooho Choi obviously had one of the all-time classics against Cub Swanson. And he's just an exciting fucking guy to watch, right? And he's going up against Nate Landwehr, who's earned himself quite the fan following as well because of his style. Now, I was kind of surprised to see Choi as the underdog in this, right? And I understand maybe why a little bit of his inactivity is coming back. Maybe didn't look quite as good as we thought he did after getting back from serving like his time in the military, which, by the way, that military policy, maybe it's a good thing overall. It probably is, right? It's probably good to do a little bit of time for your country and all that stuff, but God damn it, it can steal some great years away from athletes, right? And I'm almost, I don't know. I don't know if they get a choice about how they get to, when they get to participate and serve their time. But if you're a young MMA fighter coming out of Korea, I know it's hard because it's during those formative years, but man, knock that shit out when you're like young if you're able to, because when you have to do it in the middle of when you're like 28 and 30 and you're gaining momentum, it's hard to bounce back from, right? But Choi has come back. He just most recently beat Bill Algeo, right? Was able to finish him. Bill Algeo is a tough customer and fought to a draw against Kyle Nelson. Now before that, he dropped 3 consecutively to Cub Swanson, Jeremy Stevens, and Charles Jourdain, right? 2 of those were by knockout. Man, rough. But he's rebounded, and he's going up against a guy, Nate Landwehr, on the other hand, who has won 4 out of his last 5. His only loss on there is the Dan Ige, who's a very respectable martial artist, right? So, I don't know, man. I think that in this fight, I'm still leaning towards Choi despite what the odds are saying, and mainly because I feel like if you watch Landwehr's fights, if you're very tactical and precise like Choi is, you can kind of put it on him a little bit and tag him with some shots. I feel like guys a lot of the time, we saw this in the Emmers fight, right? We saw it a little bit in like the Onama fight. Like if you put a pace on Nate Landwehr early, you better get him the fuck out of there, right? Because he can take a shot, right? And if you allow the tides to turn, he ultimately he starts marching forward. And for Dooho Choi, I just don't think that he'll play into that same type of fight. I think Choi is going to be patient, hanging out on the outside and letting his technical striking do the work. I don't think he's going to be pressing Nate Landwehr and trying to get him out of there and hit him with big shots. He's going to be taking what comes to him, and I do think that Landwehr exposes himself a lot. Now, Landwehr is great at I hate to categorize this whole style as this because he's good at more things. He does a great job of bringing that front kick up the middle. He mixes in his attacks. He'll go to the clinch. He throws knees. He loves to get to the plum and just fucking tee off on guys from there. He works well in the clinch. But I think that the grappling is going to be very interesting. I think Dooho Choi has a big advantage in the grappling department. And I also just think he has an advantage in the technical striking department. I think this is a very tough fight for Landwehr because I don't think Choi is going to burn himself out chasing Landwehr down. I think he's going to wait for Landwehr to come to him, pick him apart with those leg kicks, slow the movement down, and then the shots will start opening them up for him. I think this is Dooho Choi's fight. I think he's the more talented martial artist. I think that, Landwehr's recent success has kind of been driving a lot of this, but overall, I think the Dooho Choi is very calculated, and I think we're going to see a little bit of a glimmer of what we were hoping the Korean Superboy might be when he first came into the UFC. I think he gets not back on track. He's obviously coming off a win, but I like him in this fight, man. I just think that like I said, he's more precise. I think he's going to wait for and Landwehr is going to get impatient. He likes to fight. So I think that if Choi, like I said, can stay on the outside, pick those legs apart, now Landwehr starts walking into things and you can tag him. So if you play a calculated fight for 15 minutes and you stay on the outside, I think Choi can win, and I do think he's a better grappler. So I got Dooho Choi in this fight. I think he's going to pull off the slight upset. And I was kind of surprised to see him as a dog in this one. Next, Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell. And Kron Gracie is coming off that fight against Jourdain where he was highly criticized because he was doing a lot of butt scooting, a lot of pulling guard, and that's just not looked at favorably in MMA, right? Honestly, it's not looked at favorably in jiu-jitsu even. If you watch guard pullers, they always get there's always people online talking shit on them. But the thing that you have to remember with Kron Gracie is his fight with Cub Swanson. This guy also had an all-time classic against Cub. Maybe not as great as the Choi fight, but He is like a fucking zombie. He just keeps marching forward and throwing punches, right? And this fight actually, to me, is very interesting because I think Bryce Mitchell has a distinct advantage in the wrestling department, and I think he has a distinct advantage in like the speed department and on the feet. I think he's going to be able to dot Kron Gracie up from the outside. But Bryce's strongest attribute is his grappling. When he gets on top of guys, he's great. He just slices through guards. He puts pressure on people. He gets to the back. He's very good. Right? He's very good, especially when he gets on top. The question is he going to be willing to take Kron Gracie down? Because there are levels to jiu-jitsu, and Kron pulls guard for a reason, right? So all in all, I like Bryce Mitchell in this fight. I think he's going to be able to dance around on the outside, pick Kron apart, go for some takedowns. He might end up letting him up, right? And just scoring the points off the takedowns and continuing to pick him apart on the feet. Or if he feels like he gets down there and he can avoid the submissions of Kron Gracie, we might see it play out on the ground and he just kind of holds Kron down and avoids the submissions and kind of dominates. Because Bryce is very good at controlling positions. I don't know, though. I know the odds are so skewed towards Bryce, and rightfully so. Kron also has like half the experience of Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell has a lot of fights now, right? And his only loss is to Josh Emmett. But going to the ground against somebody who is that good is always dangerous. But in MMA, when you can throw punches, there's just more variables involved. I do think that it's a little bit easier to stay out of that submission danger if you know it's coming. And I think that's going to be the case. I think Bryce is going to be able to take Kron down at will. And I think he's going to have a distinct advantage on the feet, whereas Kron has more of a like lumbering pace. Is that lumbering? Lumbering? I don't know. I think that's a fucking word. But he just kind of comes forward slowly and keeps throwing punches. He's always there, always in your face. That could cause problems for Bryce, but overall, I think this is Bryce's fight to lose. I think if he comes in with a smart game plan, he's going to win this one. Heavyweight bout is next. We got Ciryl Gane versus Alexandre Volkov. And I was looking at this, guys. This is crazy. Ciryl Gane has fought in 7 straight main events. 7 straight main events, 5-rounders, right? If we go through his record, let me see if I can pull it up here. I just had it. Give me a second. All right, here we go. Ready? February 27th, he fought Jairzinho Rozenstruik in a headliner. Then he fought Volkov. That's going to be the rematch, right? He beat Volkov via unanimous decision a couple months later. Then he fought Derek Lewis at UFC 265 for the interim heavyweight championship. They headlined. Francis Ngannou, he lost. Headlined that card. Knocked out Tai Tuivasa in UFC Fight Night in September 2022, headlined that card. Lost to John Jones, obviously, in March of 2023, headlined that card. And then he just most recently knocked out Sergey Spivak at UFC Fight Night in September of 2023. So 7 straight headlines in a row. This guy's been in main event after main event, and he knows what it's like to prepare for 5 rounds. Now, on the other hand, Alexandre Volkov is currently riding a 4-fight winning streak, right? So he's got a little bit of momentum built up now too. And when you get to heavyweight, I'm not so concerned about the age of Volkov. Look at the champion. John Jones is 37. Volkov is 36. I think Gane is 33 or 34. I got it pulled up. Let me tell you. He's 34, right? And the problem with Volkov, I think personally, Volkov is probably the most underrated heavyweight in the entire UFC roster. He's very good. He gives a lot of guys a lot of problems. And he's just very technical. He's a former Bellator champion. But he's just consistent, and he's got a very hard style to deal with because of his length. He's got good takedown defense, a good jab, and he uses that length well. A lot of guys don't. But Gane was able to outwork him and get the better of the strikes. And he just had more tools in the toolbox in the first fight. And when you're going into a 3-rounder, I think that Gane is going to be able to open up a lot more, right? He's going to be able to let a lot more things fly because he doesn't have to worry about exhausting himself quite so much. So for me in this fight, I think Gane is going to have to find ways to get on the inside, obviously, of those strikes of Volkov. And I just think that with his unique footwork and how light he is on his feet, his ability to move, he's going to find those angles. And because it's only a 15-minute fight, I think because of the conditioning that he's done over his last 7 fucking fights, he's going to be in the shape to put a pace on Volkov and potentially get him out of there. I like Ciryl Gane a lot in this fight. And really, I think for me, ultimately what it boils down to, because Volkov is very good. He is long, but you kind of know what Volkov is going to do at this point, Gane is a little bit more unpredictable. And to me, this fight is about like who left more on the table in the rematch, like who, or in the first fight. Like who's looking at that first fight and thinks that they can expose some of the holes in the other person's game. And to me, just because of the variety of attacks that Gane has, that's Ciryl Gane. I think he's the one more likely to make the adjustments based off of how they fought the first time. I think Volkov is more probably inclined to come out with sort of the same game plan because that's just how he fights, right? Whereas Gane, because he's so well versed, has the ability to mix things up a little bit more, and I think that leads to success for him in this fight. So I'm taking Ciryl Gane. He's a big favorite in this fight, but I do think he's going to win. I think the odds are deserving. Now, next fight. This is probably a welterweight title eliminator between Ian Machado, Garry, and Shavkat Rakhmonov. On paper, I can understand why you look at this fight and you look at Shavkat. He's finished everybody that he's fought. And you think that Shavkat has this big wrestling and grappling advantage. And that might be true. He might be all around more skillful there. But Ian Garry has been working with Charles Oliveira. And that's not the only reason that I'm like saying he's going to give him problems. Ian is so fucking slick on the feet. And you doubt that a little bit, but if you watch what he did to like D-Rod, Danny Rodriguez, man, he's so good on the feet. I think too, it's important to consider that so much of Shavkat Rakhmonov's game is pressuring you. He's very good. He's very well-rounded. I'm not saying that. He's a very technical, solid striker. He stays very fundamentally sound, but he puts pressure on guys. I have doubts about his ability to put that sort of pressure on Ian Garry because Ian is so sharp on the feet. Now, we saw that Ian and even MVP are in different leagues, right? But I think Ian is going to fucking frustrate Shavkat on the feet. I think he's going to be able to circle. And guys, big, tall, young, athletic guys are hard to fucking take down. And a lot of Shavkat's finishes, not that he's great on the ground. Don't get me wrong. When he gets there, he is good. But I think Ian will have the tools if it does get there to survive. But most importantly, I don't think it's going to be easy to just wrestle Ian Garry to the ground. I think that because of his length and because of his ability to like circle and not, you got to think, I think takedown opportunities for Shavkat open up when he starts letting his hands go and breaking his opponents, pressuring them up against the cage, hitting them with stuff they can't keep up with. Level changes start to open up. He's really good at getting to that single leg and he likes to club the head. But if Ian can defend those, we have an interesting fucking fight. This is a good fight. I don't care what anyone, like, maybe it plays out that Shavkat does just go out, walk through him, dominate, whatever. But in my opinion, this is a really good fight. I think that you got two young guys, both undefeated. Ian's 27, I believe, and Shavkat's 30. Like, they're right. Ian's probably on the cusp of entering his prime. Shavkat probably just entered it. This is a great fucking fight between two young contenders, and the winner does deserve a title fight, in my opinion. And man, like I said, I just think it's going to be harder for Shavkat to put the sort of pressure that he's used to putting on guys and close that distance. This is going to be a tough fight, and I think people are sleeping on Ian Garry a little bit in this one and just looking at the odds and looking at the submission prowess of Shavkat Rakhmonov, and rightfully so. But man, you got to be able to get the fight to the ground first. And if Ian Garry can just make things a little bit difficult, even if he does get taken down sometimes, if he can just stay fundamentally sound, stay safe, get back to the feet, we might see him have an advantage over Shavkat on the feet. I'm telling you, if this kid can circle, keep his back off the cage, I think Ian Garry could win this fight. Now, I'm picking Shavkat. I do like the fact that he pressures forward. I think there's a massive advantage to being the aggressor in mixed martial arts. And I do think that he probably is the better wrestler. I think if you just look at it, he's probably overall the more well-rounded martial artist. But goddamn, man, sometimes it's just about matchups, and I think this is a good fight. I think for what the odds are worth, Ian Garry's worth putting a little bit of money on. I really do. I think that Ian Garry has a good chance in this fight, and I think we might get I'm most excited for this. I'm even more excited for this fight, honestly, than the title fight. Watch it be a fucking dud. Shavkat runs through him, and I'll be like, yeah, I should have fucking just listened to everybody, right? But I think it's an interesting fight. I think it's a good matchup. And I think that the odds makers are sleeping on Ian Garry a little bit. All right, finally, we get to the headliner. Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. And again, Kai Asakura coming in, making his UFC debut, and immediately getting a title shot. A lot of people might not normally be in favor of this. But if you look at the state of the flyweight division, a lot of guys have been fighting and beating each other. Tatsuro Taira, most recently, he just lost his most recent fight, right? So it's not like he was primed to fight for the title. And Kai Asakura is coming from a legit organization in Ryzen. That's where like Yuri Prochazka came from, right? And he just beat Juan Archuleta, who is a former Bellator champion. So you know that he's legit, but there are three things that make me nervous for Asakura in this fight. First off, if you go back through his record, he has never gone 5 rounds in his entire career. He's only ever gone as far as 3, right? And Pantoja, on the other hand, has now fought 3 straight 5-round fights, right? So, man, it's like he not only is he getting that octagon experience in, he's getting it in there against Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval, and Steve Erceg. Before that, he beat Perez. He beat Royval again before that, and then Manel Kopp. So he's been fighting high-level guys, but I really think a big difference maker in this fight could be when it hits rounds 3, 4, 5. I think that you'll start to see Pantoja take over because also this is the second thing that makes me nervous. Asakura has a tendency to blitz. And when he blitzes, he does find success. He'll land shots on his opponents, but he also has a tendency to leave himself open. And I think that Pantoja, being the established champion, he's fought all these different styles. Like I said, he's been here. He's done this. I think he'll be more patient, and energy expenditure in MMA is so important. And I really think that you're going to see competitive rounds early on, and then you'll start to see Kai Asakura burn out as we start getting into like deep into round 3 and then the championship rounds 4 and 5. I just think Pantoja is going to take over there. And third, I think these things are going to end up being a big factor in the fight, and then they don't play out at all. But you can take Kai Asakura down. I think he'll have a speed advantage over Pantoja. I think he'll be a little bit more he'll be a little quicker, like moving around, all that stuff. But you can take him down. And when you do take him down, I don't want to call it a terrible tendency because it actually hasn't been to his detriment too often. He gets back to his feet. But when he returns to his feet, he has a bad habit of exposing his back. And Pantoja is not a motherfucker that you want to expose your back to, right? So I guess these 3 things, I feel like they can all play into each other, right? Like I think that Asakura blitzes a lot and he uses large amounts of energy very quickly. That's just how he fights. And I think that that's going to tire him out as the fight goes on. And I think that'll also open him up to getting taken down. And then when he gets taken down, I don't like the way he returns to his feet. He doesn't return to his feet by getting his feet to the hips, kicking away and keeping his chest facing his partner or his opponent. He exposes his back. And Pantoja is a fucking submission artist. 10 of his victories have come by way of submission, right? So he knows how to get the job done if that opportunity presents itself. So for all of these reasons, I think this could be a competitive fight. And I know this is kind of a common theme that you hear a lot in like fighting and stuff, but I think Kai Asakura's best chance is early on in the bout. Maybe catch Pantoja with something that like gets him off guard and kind of rocks him, and then you can take over from there. But if I'm being honest, energy expenditure, just time in the octagon, time against high-level competition, grappling, all these things I think kind of lean in favor of Pantoja. I really like Pantoja in this fight if Asakura can't get something done early on. I think that blitzing that he does, man, he's just going to tire himself out. And if it doesn't work, Pantoja is still going to be there and still putting it on him. So I got Alexandre Pantoja in this fight. But a great, like I said, one of the like fullest cards that we've had from top to bottom, I feel like in a long time. This card is very talent stacked and very like, if you're a fan, you know most of the names on it, which is always a good thing, right? So I'm excited, man. I think it's going to be a good night of fights and a good matchup. Also, I don't do musicals at all, but my wife is going to see Wicked this weekend with her girlfriend. So like, I'm just going to be chilling, sitting at the house, probably drinking a couple beers, maybe order some pizza, watching the fights. Bliss, right? But anyway, guys, hopefully you guys are able to enjoy in your own way as well. Yeah, that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you as always for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, all that good shit I have to ask you to do every fucking episode, right? And otherwise, enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, enjoy the fights. Thank you all.